Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone present in the Chamber and those listening online to the business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Alex Hall and I'm the Chairman of this committee. Councillor Richard White sadly couldn't be present with us for this meeting. So I would like to nominate Councillor Charlotte Vernon to be Vice Chairman for this meeting. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? None. Any abstentions? None. Thank you very much. Councillor Vernon, please join me. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcasted live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request that anyone present to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? May I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Request to speak will be collated by Councillor Vernon. I will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise and ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from, as you say, Councillor Richard Wright with no replacement. Thank you.
Okay. I understand from Councillor Wright that he was unable to attend the meeting this morning due to a family bereavement. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to send my condolences to him and his family. So, okay, on to item 2, declarations of members' interest. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interest. Do any members wish to declare? No? That is great. So moving on to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December 2024. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 18 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Stokes. And a seconder, please. Councillor Vernon, thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, thank you. That is carried. So item 4 of the agenda, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I have no announcements today. We have a busy agenda that includes consideration of 2 pre-decision items. Therefore, I want to stress the importance of taking reports as read, and I ask that our presenters summarise the key points and type of input expected by the committee. We are also joined today by Alfie Ellison, Chair of Lincolnshire Young Voices, who will contribute to the presentation of item 5. On behalf of the committee, a very warm welcome to you, Alfie. I hope that you find this meeting of great benefit and really look forward to your contribution. Finally, I would like to welcome Councillors Mike Clark online and Tom Smith here in the Council Chamber, who are present today in relation to item 7, the works of the Scrutiny Panel B. I don't believe we have any executive council announcements or announcements from senior officers. So moving on to item 5 of the agenda, the public transport annual update and Lincolnshire Young Voices presentation. This scrutiny report can be found on pages 19 to 32 of the agenda pack. This report offers an annual update on public transport developments since the committee's last review on 17th of July 2023 and highlights progress on the ambitious local bus initiatives launched in 2023. In terms of our actions, it is asked that we consider and comment on the contents and detail of the report and that we highlight any recommendations or further actions for consideration to the Executive Council for Highways, Transport and IT in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Stuart Eccles, Manager Network Design, Helen Reek, the Support Manager Service Manager, and Andrew Garber, Participation Officer for Quality and Standards, are also present for this item debate. Following Stuart's introduction, we will move on to Alfie Allison, Chair of Lincolnshire Young Voices, for a presentation. Questions will be taken at the end of these presentations. Over to you, Stuart, then Alfie.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as the Chairman pointed out, this report provides an update on public transport in Lincolnshire since the last report to this committee in July 23. Since the last report, we've worked closely with our bus operator partners to help provide a stable bus network for residents by making the best use of available government grants that have helped the team to improve services across the county following the decline in public bus services brought on by the pandemic. This ongoing work stream has helped bus service patronage recover to near pre-COVID levels, with 13.3 million journeys undertaken in Lincolnshire between April 23 and March 24. This number represents 99% of what our pre-COVID patronage was, and for Lincolnshire, this represents nearly 15% above what the national average is. Detailed in the report are the enhancements made to bus services through BSIP funding. These centre on increasing the frequency of Lincolnshire's key interurban bus corridors and town-centric services, raising them to appropriate and sustainable levels that provide good standard of service for residents. These enhancements have seen growth levels in patronage ranging from 10% up to and above 80%, and at the time of writing, over 250,000 additional journeys had been made on these enhanced services since April 2024. The increases in frequency have been complemented by improvements to bus shelter infrastructure through repairing and replacing our bus stops and our shelters across the county, as well as introducing over 100 digital real-time information signs at key locations. And developing this estate of assets will form a central part of the work undertaken through the next 12 to 18 months with further BSIP funding. In 2024 also saw the rollout of the booking app on Call Connect, which has been a long-term project that has proved to be very successful. The app allows residents to self-serve their bookings on Call Connect, giving them greater access to manage how and when they travel. To date, since the app has been fully rolled out across the county, 53% of bookings are now made on the app. This then, in turn, provides greater capacity for the scheduling team, which reduces the wait time for residents when they're calling in to make bookings. So it's very much a combined benefit there to residents. Further, patronage on the Call Connect service remains above pre-COVID levels. Across the county, passenger numbers returned to a normalised level early on in autumn of 2023 and have remained stable ever since. The levels of usage of Call Connect demonstrate its value to our most rural communities, for whom it's very much a lifeline service. And with the help of BSIP funding, we were able to ensure that the £2 national fare cap was reached to residents who only had access to Call Connect for public transport. And at the time of writing, this fare scheme was taken up on over 90,000 journeys in the last year. That's my update, Chairman. Happy to pass over to Alison. Alfie Allison. Sorry.
Chairman, if I just may introduce Alfie and just give a bit of context then. So Alfie is from Lincolnshire Young Voices, which is a group that is supported by the County Council, so he's going to tell you a bit more about that. But Alfie's group carried out a survey last summer for bus passengers, and he's presented that to our bus operators at the Enhanced Partnership back in October, which was very well received. And it's the start of building up those relationships with the bus operators. And one or two you've also been to see on an individual basis. So without further ado, Chairman, if I may hand over to Alfie.
Thank you very much. So this is a snapshot and focus of some of the aspects of the survey. So the survey ran from May of last year to the end of August. And we've had over 600 completions, which is really good. Next slide. Yeah, the pitch side, sorry. So before I talk about the results, just a little bit about Lincolnshire Young Voices. So we're a SEND participation group of young people and young adults aspiring to make a difference to services across Lincolnshire. So it ranges from the ages of 15 to 25, but we do have a couple of older members that have stayed on with the group. But we're advocating for young people with a disability and giving them the opportunity to have a voice, which is really, really good. So we're just finishing our current priorities on bullying and transport, and we're now starting to think of our next projects that we're going to do. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start by thanking the independent travel training team who have been at the forefront of the work that we've done since day one. They've completed some of the surveys with their young people that they work with, which has been really good. So our wider focus is on accessibility. So it covers the likes of mobility and sensory needs and a wider SEND focus. So 21% saying they had a social emotional disability, SEMH for short. So this includes the likes of ADHD, autism deficit disorder, anxieties and mental health issues that do affect day-to-day life. 31% had a physical disability, often associated with people in wheelchairs. This can include the likes of COPD, blindness and epilepsy. And 48% had a learning disability. Next slide, please. So this question was linked to eligibility issues and awareness. So one of our committee members, Katie, she's registered blind, but hasn't yet got herself a pass. Additionally, completions were also completed by senior citizens. But what we found with the figure is that there needs to be a bit more advertising when it comes to the free bus pass. Next slide, please. So this slide is about punctuality. So over 3/4 of those answering said buses were arriving on time or running a little bit late. So we said that not every bus can arrive exactly on the scheduled time, so we gave a 5-minute leeway for that sort of timing of when they're arriving. So having the app helps you track the bus. Public do get frustrated not knowing about this, not knowing about the bus arriving on time, and those with autism do get stressed when the bus isn't arriving on time. Next slide, please. So such as using the ramp or telling your stop. We are aware that there are many hidden disabilities, so drivers aren't always aware of this. So awareness around disability is perhaps something to look at. Things like the Sunflower Lanyard scheme, which recognises hidden disabilities, is quite a big thing, especially since COVID. Lincolnshire Young Voices has also created some award-winning training, which is designed at communicating with people with special educational needs and disabilities, and it's called A Rough Guide to Not Putting Your Foot in It. Next slide, please. So this is quite a big one to us. So 70 wheelchair users took part in our survey. There seems to be a real issue in terms of allocated space and whether that space is available. 41% of people in a wheelchair said they were unable to get on the bus. So picture this in your mind. Imagine waiting for a bus and it shows up, and as we saw in the previous figure about punctuality, quite a big percentage were running late or even cancelled in some aspects. So how would you feel in that situation with the first bus arriving and potentially the wheelchair space being occupied and the next bus potentially being cancelled? It would be quite a sticky situation. So actually this has happened to one of our committee members. So volunteer and ex-chair Jo has said this has happened many times to her and has had to miss meetings. So she's getting earlier buses in case there's no room. More of a worry in these colder months, as we've seen. Lincolnshire Young Voices members believe there is need for more accessible space for wheelchairs and space to accommodate the larger motorised wheelchairs. Next slide, please. So we opened up the opportunity for service users to have their say on a bit of feedback to us. So as you can see with the percentages, the first percentage, that 4.6%, that is of all the survey responses we got to that question. And the 2.3% is of all the responses we've had. So the first one, 26 responses, talked about greater frequency. So the popular comments were better Sunday services and more evening services. Just 3 responses talked about mobility, and that sort of echoes that previous slide of lack of wheelchair space. So the space for a wheelchair was very limited. 16 responses talked about communication and information. So my favourite one on there was about the communication training for those with SEND. Next up, announcements were mentioned quite a bit, and guidance from the bus driver as best stop to a light at was also mentioned. Next slide, please. 57 of our responses were positive, so quite a big thing we've seen, and that was quite the popular comment from it all, was the £2 fare cap got people on board the bus. The driver was very friendly and chatty. Great onward connections, which is really good to see. 96 responses talked about reliability. So buses are often running late or cancelled, and quite a lot of our service users talked about the X6 bus now gone, which was quite a crucial bus route as it took people from Birchwood to the hospital. 8 responses talked about the app. So not every bus company in Lincolnshire's got an app yet at the minute, but the comments that were mentioned were, so people would like to know a reason of why the bus was cancelled. So that could be like, for example, the bus not being available or lack of drivers. And one that sort of surprised me was about the mobile ticketing, which often on these apps disappears after purchasing them. That's it from me.
Do you have any speakers? Councillor Clark.
Alfie, I was quite alarmed when you said space for wheelchair. Is this on all the bus routes, all the companies, or is it just certain companies?
So when we looked at, delved into the figures itself, there was 4 bus routes that we identified where this issue was happening. So it was the Centre Bus 28, which runs from Grantham to Stamford, the 56, Stagecoach 56 that runs from Lincoln to Skegness, the 50, PC Coaches 50, which is Lincoln to Mablethorpe via Louth, and the last one was the 51 from Grimsby to Louth. So it wasn't normally local services, but more the long distance services.
Councillor Eddie Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alfie, for that excellent presentation. I agree with you entirely about the X6. It was a terrific service, especially for those that needed to go to the hospital. Obviously a bit parochial because I represent Birchwood, but I'd like to see that reinstated. But thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alfie. That was really, really interesting. Is there anything, and obviously I appreciate you might not be able to answer this now, but is there anything that you think could be done further for those bus companies that don't have an app? Because I know that we've talked before about some bus companies not having the app, but would it help sort of if they updated on social media so that your group could look at that? And then the other point that I just wanted to ask was about whether, though you mentioned obviously that some haven't got wheelchair spaces, is that because they're already being used, or is it because they're already being used by somebody who shouldn't be using it, like pushchairs and whatnot, perhaps are not always sort of supposed to be in wheelchair accessible spots, but may be? So I just wondered if you knew those. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer your first bit and then I'll go on to the second bit. So it's quite funny actually, because I had a conversation with PC Coaches last week. So they don't currently have an app, so they update their customers via Twitter, X even. But not everyone's got social media, and I think that's the sort of bit that everyone's a little bit annoyed about. It's just that information. But it's something that we're working with bus companies on, particularly with PC coaches, is that enrolment of the app to provide live updates. In terms of your second question, so it's the same thing actually when speaking to PC coaches. Often there is push chairs or trolleys blocking the wheelchair spaces, which is a problem, but PC coaches are addressing the issue and instating an additional wheelchair space on their buses, which is really, really good to see.
Thank you, Alfie. That's absolutely brilliant to hear. And then I just wanted to make a couple of points on the first part of the report, which is that really our numbers are fantastic compared to our neighbouring local authorities. And I think particularly the 73% increase in patronage in Gainsborough, 104% growth in Stamford, on 2.28, which I think is Stamford, it may be Grantham off the top of my head, Stamford is brilliant. Do we have any idea what the expected growth is likely to be after the new bus stops are installed? And also just two further points, if I may. You've talked about the trial rate of 50p in Sleaford. Do we know how long that trial rate is going to be in place for and what impact that may have when that's gone? And finally, the Call Connect £2 fare has been really, really well publicised. I've obviously spoken before about what a huge fan I am of Call Connect, and it's brilliant for the local communities that I serve. Everybody knows about it, and I think you did a really great job getting the message out about the £2 fare, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. So in terms of the growth trajectory, some are getting to a point where I suppose that's the ceiling of their growth. Others, like the Gainsborough into town, continues to grow. So when the report was published, it was 83%. That's still going up, 91%. So that's really showing some good promise. Just touching on the Sleaford trial of the 50p, I think it's likely that come the new financial year that will change. It has been really popular though, so pre-introduction of that fare, the predominant users were concessionary fare holders, and the amount of revenue that came in through fare payers was quite low. That skyrocketed in the first 6 months. I think it's likely that whilst it won't be 50p, it might not be that much more, so I don't think the impact will be too big. And in terms of the infrastructure that's going in, we are trying to monitor that input and the feedback to see where we put infrastructure in, does it have a tangible improvement in terms of where people are boarding. I think that answers all your questions.
Sorry, just the Stamford, how fantastic a result that is, and sort of the new bus stops being installed, if you perceived much growth after that as well, because that has been a huge increase. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the Stamford one, I suppose, was one of the few towns in the county that didn't really have an adequate service. We've now hopefully rectified that. That will probably take quite a long time to carry through, though. With it being a big shift, it will probably take a good 12 to 18 months before we see the true benefits. But the bus stops that have gone in the last week should have a real boost on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Seeing none. Thank you for questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee endorse the report and presentation, that our appreciation and satisfaction of assurances provided be recorded, and ask that our comments raised and feedback offered by this committee be cascaded further and shared with the relevant officers and the relevant executive member. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. None. So thank you, that is agreed. And thank you, Alfie, for your presentation. It was very much appreciated. Thank you. So item 6 of the agenda, budget scrutiny, revenue and capital budget proposals. This pre-decision scrutiny report was circulated as a supplementary pack on the 20th of January 2025. This report outlines the financial plans for Lincolnshire County Council's highways and transport services for the upcoming fiscal year. It addresses key cost pressures, including inflation, increased employment costs, and changes in government funding allocations. Alongside the need for savings and adjustments to maintain service delivery, the report highlights the challenges posed by reduced funding growth and provides a breakdown of proposed revenue and capital budgets. The decision on the budget will be made by the Executive on the 4th of February 2025, before being presented for approval at the full council meeting on the 21st of February 2025. In terms of actions required by this committee, it is asked that we review and comment on the report, consider the financial implications for highways and transport services, and provide comments or recommendations, and agree that our insights and comments be shared with the executive for consideration at its meeting on the 4th of February 2025. The report will be presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director for Financial Services. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I think that was pretty much everything I was going to say, I think. So you summed that up very nicely. So the Executive made its budget proposals for 25-26 for consultation on the 7th of January, and this paper is part of that consultation. So as the Chair says, any comments made today will go back into that meeting before the Exec makes its final recommendations to go into Council on the 4th of February. Just to point that the Exec recommended an increase of 2.99% council tax as part of that consultation, and any feedback that the members have today about that is also can form part of that feedback. So the report highlights changes to government policy that have impacted our budgets, particularly around national living wage and national insurance changes. And the 25-6 settlement showed a much lower increase in funding than we've received in recent years, which has led to a deficit position for 25-6 and subsequent years. So it's within that context that we are setting this budget. The table at paragraph 2.2 shows the revenue changes relevant to the transport and highway services. For transport, that includes increases in inflation, around 5.5 million, and the extended rights to free travel grant being rolled into that service line. Also some inflation on the public transport services. The highways inflation increase of 1 million is included in that table, as well as the removal of one-off funding that the council agreed for the current year of 2.5 million, which is why that table shows as a negative figure in the pressures, which I appreciate could be a bit confusing. The capital programme for the Whole Place Directorate is in paragraph 3.6, which includes the services for this committee. There's no new additions for this area as in terms of LCC funding, other than updating some of the major schemes in receipt of some grants, which will be reflected in the final paper into committee. And at the time of writing this report, we hadn't had notification of the DFT funding around highways asset protection, which we now have, and that will be fed into the final report that goes into council. I'm happy to take any comments back or any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Okay, Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your report as well. I do find it slightly concerning that our share is proportionately less than in years gone by, but it is what it is, as you say. We can't do anything about that. The employers' national insurance and threshold reduction, I agree, is a big concern, and I note that there will be a significant cost impact on that, although I am sort of really glad to hear that we've got strong foundations, and if we hadn't got those, I don't really like to think of the position that we've been in with the challenges that we're going to face ahead. So yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Do you have any further speakers? Councillor Stokes.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. No, following on from Councillor Vernon, the national insurance is absolutely terrible for most businesses, not just the county council. But as you can see from the paper, 5.5 million is a lot of money, and that will be taken away from services to fund that national insurance increase. The biggest concern I have is also the external people that we use and the providers. We do not know the cost that's going to be, and we will not get that reimbursed. So that is going to be a cost on the county council, which is a huge concern for myself.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further speakers? Seeing none, I would like to thank you for questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee endorses the report and supports the proposed recommendations as set out in the report. And I ask that all comments and suggestions raised by this committee be shared with the executive ahead of its consideration of the service area budget reports in February. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stokes, I think was first. So we'll now vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. I think that's unanimous, but any abstentions? Okay, one. And any against? None. That's great. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 7 of the agenda, Scrutiny Panel B, review of the traffic management policy in Lincolnshire. The next scrutiny report is on pages 33 to 142 and pertains to the review of Lincolnshire's traffic management policy conducted by Scrutiny Panel B to address key traffic challenges across the county. The review focuses on improving road safety, managing congestion, and ensuring accessibility through measures such as pedestrian crossings, traffic calming, and school traffic management, and disabled parking provisions. The report emphasises aligning local practices with the national legislation, integrating advanced technologies and addressing the backlog of traffic measures requests. The committee is invited to consider the recommendations and determine whether to support them ahead of the Executive's decision on the 4th of March 2025. In terms of our actions, it is asked that we consider and comment on the detail contained in the report and determine whether we support recommendations 1 to 9 to the Executive as set out in the report, and agree that our insights and comments be shared with the Executive for consideration at its meeting on the 4th of March 2025. The report will be introduced by Chiara Hajanu, our Scrutiny Officer. Recommendations will be presented by Councillor Gary Taylor, Chairman of Scrutiny Panel B, and Councillor Mike Clark, Vice Chairman of the panel. And lastly, we will hear from the officers who were involved in this review. Karen Kassar, Assistant Director of Highway Services, is also present for the debate. Before we move on, I would like to thank the Chairman and members of Scrutiny Panel B for their meticulous efforts and their in-depth deliberations, as well as the wider team of officers from Highways, Engagement and Democratic Services for their valued contributions and support offered to members throughout the duration of this review. We will take questions at the end of all contributions, so over to you, Chiara. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you very much. In February 2021, the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee identified a review of Lincolnshire's traffic management policy as a priority, recognising the recurring concerns about speeding raised by residents at local fora. This led to the establishment of a working group in October 2021, which looked at key lines of inquiry and terms of reference for a future investigation. On August 24 of 2023, the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board approved the allocation of this review topic to Scrutiny Panel B, which was chaired by Councillor Gary Taylor. The panel consisted of 6 members, Councillors Mike Clark, Alexander Maughan, Kevin Clark, Thomas Dyer and Matthew Bowles. The terms of reference were finalised during the panel's inaugural meeting, which was in December 2023. The panel convened 6 times between December 2023 and July 2024 to explore various thematic areas related to traffic management, including pedestrian crossing policies, moving traffic enforcement, and traffic calming measures. The key objectives of the review included ensuring policy was relevant and effective and in line with current legislation, proposing frameworks for managing traffic and travel safety, and evaluating the clarity of existing guidelines for implementation. The review was completed in August 2024 and was due for consideration in the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee's meeting in October 2024. However, a decision was then made by members of this committee to defer consideration to January 2025 and today, due to the ongoing review of Lincolnshire's County Council's Constitution, with a view to ensure that recommendations of the review aligned with the Constitution. Now, on behalf of the panel, I would like to thank all key contributors to the review. These were our subject matter experts, leading officers, internal and external stakeholders, Blue Badge service users and residents of Lincolnshire who took part in the online survey associated with this review. Without their testimonies, valued contributions and sincere interest, this review wouldn't have been possible to complete. Chairman and members, it was my absolute privilege and my pleasure to have worked alongside esteemed colleagues and panel members towards capturing the panel's proposed recommendations and building the narrative supporting this report. I would now like to introduce Councillor Gary Taylor, Chairman of the panel, who will present the report and its findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the committee. I'm pleased to be in a position here to present the findings of Scrutiny Panel B, which, as you've referred to, is the review of traffic management policy in Lincolnshire. As we know, this area affects all of us, all of our residents. There's a very long and detailed report here, so I'll have an introduction here, then of course we refer to the debate and questions which follow this. The primary aim of this review was to assess the relevance and effectiveness of our current transport management policy, ensuring it aligns with both legislation and the evolving needs of our local communities. This review was driven by the need to reassess and realign our policies with the changing demands of traffic management, road safety and community welfare across both urban and rural areas in our county. Our objectives focused on several key areas such as pedestrian safety, speed limits, school traffic, environmental weight limits, traffic calming measures. Our aim is to make our roads safer for all, without launching a war on the motorist or being anti-business. Our aim was to create a policy framework that balances safety, traffic flow and community welfare while supporting Lincolnshire's corporate plan. Through extensive stakeholder engagement and public feedback, we aim to formulate clear recommendations that will not only improve road safety but also support the long-term efficiency of our transport infrastructure. I will take this report as read, but I'll summarise the findings and recommendations of this report. Recommendation 1. The panel recognises the importance of pedestrian safety, especially near schools and in rural areas. We propose revisiting the criteria of pedestrian crossings to ensure accident severity is taken into account when assessing the need for new crossings. We also recommend streamlining the communication process with local councillors to ensure decisions are timely and transparent. Recommendation 2. Enforcement, particularly in school zones, was identified as a key area for improvement. While installing CCTV systems was deemed to be costly, the panel proposed a mix of live and dummy cameras in high priority areas, along with a focus on community-funded enforcement mechanisms. Recommendation 3. Lincolnshire's unique blend of industrial, rural and urban roads has led to concerns about the impact of heavy goods vehicles. We found that a formal environmental weight limit policy was necessary to address the volume of requests from residents on HGVs in sensitive areas. Recommendation 4. As we all know, the appearance of our street scene is vital to those who live here and those who visit our county. So we do urge the Council to seek additional sponsorship opportunities to improve the appearance of our roundabouts and verges. Recommendation 5. Disabled parking provision was an important element of us in this updated policy. We heard from our experts, service users and residents that access to disabled parking permits were challenging, particularly in town centres and residential areas. Our review recommended to review this area, particularly to expand the provision of 24-hour disabled parking bays, particularly in areas supporting both the daytime and nighttime economy. Our public engagement survey revealed a strong demand for improved accessibility and more consistent enforcement of blue badge bays. Recommendation 6. Managing traffic around schools is vital for safeguarding children. We explored solutions such as staggered start times to reduce congestion and proposed allowing community-funded CCTV to enforce parking and traffic rules. We also recommended that working in partnership with Lincolnshire Police and Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership and schools to establish a joint package of measures aimed at improving safety around our schools. This includes a focus on education, engagement and enforcement. We also recommended ensuring that new school developments include drop-off and pick-up points as a measure preventing future traffic issues. We aim to create a safer and more manageable environment around our schools. We should also note that this includes collaboration with the schools, councils and police that is essential to ensure compliance and to foster positive driver behaviours. Recommendation 7. We highlighted the need for a tiered approach to traffic calming to balance the high cost of physical interventions such as road humps and more, which were of course a costly and more cost-effective solution, for example, improved road signage and markings. Recommendation 8, traffic regulation orders. As we are all well aware, the current process can be very time-consuming, often delaying the implementation of critical traffic management interventions. The panel recommended that Lincolnshire County Council invites the Planning and Regulation Committee, acting with advisory powers, to consider any objections to executive proposals for traffic regulation orders. Recommendation 9. Finally, the panel looked closely at existing speed limit policy. We recommended greater flexibility in setting speed limits, particularly on our rural roads, where the default national speed limit of 60 miles an hour may not be suitable. The introduction of a lower, more appropriate speed limit in these areas could help to prevent accidents, enhance safety. Additionally, we sought to reduce the fluctuation in speed limits on short stretches of roads, which will lead to smoother transitions between speed limits. Not only will this improve driver compliance, also reduce congestion, creating a safer and more predictable driving environment. You'll be pleased to know I'm now reaching the end of this presentation. I wish once again to emphasise that these recommendations in this review are part of the detailed investigations and consultations of experts, major public feedback. We also again thank the experience and opinions of our councillors on the panel and the professional advice of our council officers. We believe these recommendations will lead to road safety for all our residents. On behalf of this panel, I seek your support in endorsing these recommendations and referring them to the executive portfolio holder for a review and adoption to leading officers will compile a detailed action plan for each recommendation. I'll now like to hand over to the Vice Chairman of this panel, Mike Clark, for his comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Our panel approached this review with clear objectives, ensuring that the policies remain relevant, proposing a robust framework for managing the network safely, the variations to clarify guidance and its implementation. As you heard from the Chairman, these goals were met through an extensive process that included gathering data, reviewing national policies, consulting with experts, engaging directly with service users and stakeholders, such as Lincolnshire Police and local communities. Engagement played a pivotal role in shaping our recommendations that Councillor Taylor went through. Insight gained from the public survey and the invaluable contribution of service users highlighted the practical changes faced on the ground by residents across a wide range of elements captured by the policies we are discussing. Our principal role was engaging with service users who had previously participated in Blue Badge parking advisory pilot. This individual, a resident with physical and neurological impairment, described the introductions of an advisory bay near her residence as life-changing, significantly reducing the daily stress of finding parking and improving their overall quality of life. They highlighted the importance of accessibility, not just for themselves, but also for their support network, reinforcing how such initiative can transform the lives of some of our most vulnerable residents. This engagement also highlighted key challenges. The advisory nature of bays led to occasional misuse, underscoring the need for enforcement measures to ensure consistent availability. Additionally, the service users stressed the importance of staff sensitivity during application processes and the need for clear guidance for Blue Badge holders. These insights have informed our recommendations to expand disabled parking provision across Lincolnshire, making them more inclusive, enforceable, and, more importantly, accessible. Our public service survey further reveal critical insights about blue badge parking in Lincolnshire. For many respondents recognised existing provisions, a significant number highlighted barriers to accessing parking, particularly in town centres. On behalf of blue badge holders or their representatives reported many challenges, with issues such as insufficient space, misuse of bays by unauthorised drivers, and inadequate accessibility emerging as constant themes. Respondents also voiced frustration about limited enforcement and inconsistent operational areas for bays, which often fail to meet their disabled individual requirements during the evenings or weekends. These findings stress the urgent need for change. Disabled residents should not be left excluded from Lincolnshire's towns and public spaces. Our recommendations are to recommend extending the operational hours of disabled bays to 24 hours, 7 days a week, and to increase the provision of both advisory and enforceable bays, which will address these gaps, ensuring that disabled badge holders can have access to the spaces they need when they need them. Through this review, the panel has demonstrated that we're out to continue to strive to prioritise fairness, inclusivity and community involvement. Our recommendations represent a clear path towards creating a more accessible, efficient and safer transport system for all. These proposals are not just about addressing today's challenges, but about future-proofing our policies to ensure they remain adaptable to the changing needs of the county. I commend the dedication of the panel and the constructive contributions from all stakeholders. Together, we have set out a roadmap to create safer, more efficient and accessible transportation systems for Lincolnshire. I urge that the committee support these recommendations ahead of their consideration by the Executive and for further acceptance by the Chief Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport IT to help us thus bring meaningful changes to our communities. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I believe Richard Fenwick is going to take the officer's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Taylor and Councillor Clark and all of Scrutiny Panel B for having officers within the discussions. Throughout last year, we had long discussions deep into the evening on many occasions, and our role as officers was to advise on the technical and legislative factors that needed to be considered and ultimately come up with feasible options that have led to the recommendations within the report. I was just looking around. I don't think there's a member in the room that I or my team have not at some point been having discussions about something that's covered within this report. It's a huge report and it does cross many service areas. I don't want to age myself or any of my colleagues, but there's a lot of experience of being out on the ground and hearing public thoughts on our current policies and some of their frustrations, which we obviously are captured through surveys, but that officer experience on what does and doesn't work fed into that. I would like to note that there's a lot of officers in the room and online today. The reason for that is purely because this has been a comprehensive report that's involved many people across many service areas, and we just wanted to make sure, given the timeliness of it, that if there's questions from the committee that hopefully Jonathan and I can answer those, but we have got subject matter experts that will be able to dip in and give the real fine detail, so we don't have to take something away and come back with any answers. So just following on from that, regarding the committee today, depending on whether the committee decides to support the proposals and any comments that come on that, the next job for officers will be to develop that action plan that Councillor Cart mentioned, and take things forward following the final decision on this report. So again, just a thank you, and we're here to answer any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much, Richard. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Clark and then Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone, you know, also that was on the committee. It was very interesting. The first question I got is, on December the 13th, a motion was passed. Does the policy take into consideration all the contents of that policy, of that motion? And the other one is a vague question. It's to do with parking outside schools. Everyone takes it that parking outside schools is directly outside of it, and it doesn't. It goes broader than that. On verges, you start with a green verge, cars park on it, it becomes a muddy patch. So one of the residents was asking me only yesterday, why can't they just tarmac it or block pave it so people can park on it and save their carpets in their houses or get wrecked by muddy feet? Thank you.
I'll take those questions in order. I believe the motion referred to was around 20-mile-an-hour limits at schools. That has been considered, and we don't consider that the recommendation within this report is in conflict with that motion, and so the policy that we develop can effectively cater for both. With regards to parking outside schools, I know Councillor Clark, we've spoken about this at length, and unfortunately there's a lot of debate that goes into that, and it covers a few things. But with regards to your specific question, there is nothing stopping us from paving grass areas other than the obvious financial considerations that would come with the precedent that's set. It would be an immense cost to pave every grass verge across Lincolnshire where there's parking issues, but they would be built to a different standard from normal footways if we were expecting vehicles to be parked on them. There are different technical standards that they're built to, which are more expensive but more robust to allow vehicles to have their wheels, either 2 wheels or 4 wheels, off the carriageway. So hopefully that answers that. It's a solution, but it is something that comes at a cost.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was part of this working group, so I'm familiar with an awful lot of this, but I can genuinely welcome seeing in print recommendation 6 there, the traffic policy for schools, and the seismic step change it represents for us as an authority there at 6.1b2 on page 52, where we are looking to explore the possibility of allowing town and parish councils and local communities to fund the installation of CCTV cameras outside of schools. I think this genuinely recognises that we as a county council cannot do everything ourselves, and that there is much to be gained by working in partnership with local communities to effectively help them to help us and to help themselves in tackling this significant issue. Because I genuinely believe that local knowledge and local communities are absolutely key to delivering many of our aims as a county council, particularly in this regard. And I look forward to seeing the implementation of measures that genuinely do empower communities on the matters, on the issues which matter most to them, and be that traffic regulation orders, be that speed limits. That local knowledge is absolutely key in all that we do. You can only learn so much from a scoring matrix that can often get overlooked when dealing with local knowledge and local scenarios. So hopefully we can get to a position where we have a policy that recognises that and implements it at a local level.
Councillor Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is both to the Chairman of the committee and indeed to highways officers. I just wondered, because Lincolnshire is such a vast county and there is a crossover in some parts to the A1, which runs up the side of it and through it sometimes. To put my question in context, really it's about whether the Scrutiny Panel B ever considered talking to National Highways. But in context, I attended back in Skellingthorpe Village Hall, which is outside of my particular division a meeting with National Highways regarding the safety of Skellingthorpe roundabout for pedestrians and cyclists, and all National Highways could come up with was signs, but that didn't actually solve the problem. It is a very dangerous roundabout. I just wondered whether the panel considered some of the crossings with the A1 and indeed whether they'd been in contact with National Highways on any of the issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, do you have an answer to that?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Strangle, for that question. No, our criteria did not cover that particular concern. However, we share your concerns regarding the issues regarding the A1, and I know also Councillor Vernon has been involved with that in her division, and there's been questions raised at full council meetings to our the portfolio holder. And I know this is being raised at other levels, including the ministers in the government. So we do share your concerns on that, and hopefully notes are taken in this meeting today to say you've made that point, and we can also add our weight to that campaign for those improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report and the recommendations. It's been a huge piece of work for Scrutiny Panel B, and I'd like to thank them for the efforts that they've put into it, and the officers as well. There's obviously a great deal of work being done. But now we've got these recommendations, what I'm trying to get a feel for is how long is it going to take before we get the new policies and rewritten, amended policies done, so that we can start taking action out there on the ground. I mean, and will those new policies and rewritten policies, amended policies, come before this committee to scrutinise before they're actually go out there and forward and be adopted? Because I do think seeing the recommendations is one thing, but seeing them actually taken forward and written in the policy it's a lot easier to comprehend and then sort of make a decision whether you're happy with it or not. But I think basically I'm happy with the recommendations. I would like to think that the resolution from full council to this committee about the 20-mile-an-hour limits will be sort of taken into account when that speed limit policy is being amended and brought forward. Presumably will be brought forward to this committee in future to say whether happy with it or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I mean, when this committee will consider the branch of policy further down the line in the next term, 2025-26, and may consider different views on this again. So, you know, it is going to continue.
Thank you, Chairman. That was the point I was trying to make. There's still a lot of work to be done on this yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I can see this is going to take quite a while before we end up with policies that can be acted upon out there on the ground. And I just like it trying to make that point clear, or get that point made clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard Fenwick.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks, and I agree that there are going to be a need for bespoke policies, for example, a revision of the speed limit policy to come before Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee for a recommendation. I'm sure Claire will be bringing new policies, but I did just want to add that as officers, obviously we've been involved in this review, and some of the things that are set out within the report, that there's examples of what could be considered, for example, for how TROs could be scored, or what a weight limit policy might look like. So I just wanted to reassure members that we haven't second guessed anything, but we're not starting from scratch on a lot of this, so we have given consideration to that throughout. which will then have to be formalised into a report to come to scrutiny for a democratic decision on. But it will result in a number of separate policy documents being either reviewed or developed in the case of ones that don't currently exist.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Just picking up on one other thing. I appreciate that this report was delayed in coming to us because of the necessity of it aligning with the Constitution and the Constitution changes which were being considered in parallel. One of the things that I know that we talked about at great length in the working group was looking around the scheme of delegation for issues that come to Planning and Regulation Committee. And the example I've always used is for where you've got those odd spurious objections to a scheme. I had one in my own division where an objection to a proposed speed limit was on the ground that they wanted the money we were going to spend on signs spent on potholes. Obviously not a serious or genuinely a material consideration for the committee. I just wonder whether this has been picked up in that constitution review because in most forms of planning those kind of objections could be dealt with in consultation with the division councillor deciding whether it goes to committee or whether it needs to go to committee or not. I just wonder if that's been picked up there, please.
Thank you. Richard. Thank you.
I'll do my best to answer that. Ultimately, the changes in line with the Constitution are ultimately as a result of this thorough review taking place with advice from legal services. So we know we've now got to a point where everything is aligned, and those changes have already taken effect without any changes to our actual specific policy documents being written. I think I would say that there's always, as those individual, for example, speed limit policy comes forward, that can be looked at, that scheme of delegation at any time, and I think that's something for other panels to consider and have advice from legal services on going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you too for the Scrutiny Panel B for a really, really interesting report, which I've read sort of quite extensively, and it's clear that a huge amount of time and effort went into preparing the report. I've just got 2 points that I'd like to raise. I'm actually sort of really sorry to say that I didn't recognise this issue with blue badges regarding hours, and I think that is something that needs to be sort of rectified very quickly. It's absolutely bonkers that there's sort of accessibility issues outside of the mainstream day where sort of blue badges aren't able to be used outside of what you'd consider to be the core office hours, so to speak. The other point that I wanted to make is regarding whether you've sort of obviously focuses rightly on 20 miles per hour around schools, but there are other areas that would benefit from 20 miles an hour too, as you've mentioned in the report. One of the local villages in a different local authority to myself have an arrangement in place with a local haulage company where they will only go at 20 miles per hour through the village, which obviously means that the residents are happy, the parish council are happy, and that's worked really, really well. And I wondered sort of whether that might be something that could be considered, particularly if there are large haulage firms or quarries within a particular area, that sort of directly impacts them on their route to a major route. And then just the final point that I'd like to raise is relating to page 124. Considering the large numbers of respondents that were between the ages of 45 and sort of 65 plus, I'm absolutely fascinated to see that people felt social media was the best way to educate people on the speed limit policy. And actually sort of that probably gives us more information for other things that actually social media is working, if that's where the majority of those people are getting that information from. So yeah, that was a really interesting report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think echo everybody else, what everybody else has said about the report. Thank you very much. It's lots of detail and lots to go out, which is interesting. Especially for me, the prioritising school zones with mandatory markings for enforcement and assessing the weight limits and prioritising these sites, that's music to my ears and probably a lot of parents in my ward. So the sooner we can look at those, that would be fantastic. 2 questions, if I may, please, probably Richard. Recommendation 3B says about allocating adequate funding, including staff, to the team to address backlog of requests. Is that funded already, or is that something we're soaking up and able to push on with straight away, or do we need extra funding for it? And the second question, I'm afraid, is back to what's been asked a couple of times. The motion that went through full council, 20-mile-an-hour limits, it seems like it would fit into this, and it doesn't seem to be mentioned at all. Is there a reason why it's not been incorporated into this? Is it just a matter of timings, or is it something that's coming up? It seems like it should have been in here, and I'm surprised it's not.
So, Chiara, please, Chiara.
Thank you very much. Just on the final point raised, I would like to make you aware that any elements and any themes that were discussed after the conclusion of the deliberations of the panel was only reflected on the executive summary that covers the covering report, apologies, that is attached before the main report. So we couldn't make any changes because what is covered through the report is what is pertinent to the discussions throughout this year of considering this theme by all members. And since anything didn't happen, if something hasn't happened throughout this period, it cannot be covered in the actual report. However, a note has been taken, and as you've heard, assurances have been provided that this will be considered in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you. Chiara's answered the second part quite well. In regards to the first point, the short answer is no. The revenue is not there to fund that level of work. However, over the last few years, I've done a lot of work with my teams where that resource would sit, and I guess the best answer I can give you at the moment is we try and be as flexible and fluid as we can across all our staff who might not always be working on traffic regulation orders, to try and fit the work where the staff are, rather than say there isn't a designated traffic officer post there that's revenue funded. So we do have some options going forward to try and take on extra workload across the vacancies I currently have within my team. But the short version is there is a revenue gap of an officer, probably around £40,000 for that level of work. We do our best to tie the workload to amount of hours per staff, but it's never going to coincide directly with a full-time equivalent. But what I would say is it's also hard to know until we develop our policy and how many requests we will get and how many of those will meet a criteria that will take a number of hours to take them through all of the legal side of things that goes through a traffic regulation order. So I appreciate that's kind of a woolly answer, but I've tried to give you the short and the long version.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Sorry, I was just making notes of some of the comments. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And as chairman of the other scrutiny committee, may I congratulate the scrutiny panel on their report, which I'm sure will lead eventually, hopefully, to improving safety for all the people that we represent. However, I'm sure you, as has been referred to by a number of speakers already, there was a motion proposed by Councillor Richard Cleaver, which was adopted unanimously on Friday the 13th of December, just recently. Councillor Cleaver couldn't make it today, he's got a family problem, so I said I would come and speak on it, if I may. The motion is actually, I gather, referred to in the report today, and I note that the first member's questions on this from Councillor Clark, thank you, Kev, and indeed I particularly welcome Councillor Brooks' comments about the frustrations of how long this is taking. I understand what we've just been told that the motion came too late to be included. These issues were raised, and the motion in December referred to a motion that came and was passed by this council on the 12th of September 2021, over 3 years ago. And now we're told today, oh, you know, it's too late. We'll look at it in the future. We're going to be looking at policies sometime. You, Chair, said it might come back in 2026. I've got to say, when are we going to see some action? I'm sorry to say that, because I think, the report, and this is not the fault, I appreciate, of the chairman of the scrutiny panel. They've kind of done their bit, but we were effectively told in December, when we raised the issues and we said we were going to put a motion down, oh, don't worry, it's going to be covered by the scrutiny panel, and they'll be reporting next month. Well, it's not been. It's been kicked down the road again. And I would just simply urge, there's a lot to say this. We're aware about of the 20 plenty policies that have been adopted by similar councils to Lincolnshire in other areas. Public concern, as you say in the report, it is in built-up areas around the county, especially close to schools and other routes leading to them, remains a critical concern, a critical issue. It was raised over 3 years ago. However, the report does not make reference to any consideration being given to or assessment being made of the effectiveness of what other highways authorities' policies are doing on 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And we rather hoped it would be. We're not suggesting, and never have, of a blanket 20-mile-an-hour ban outside schools or anywhere else. But, as endorsed by full council in December, we believe that communities, parish and town councils should be empowered now, through their local council division member, to request 20-mile-an-hour zones where they believe these would be appropriate in their area, and that those requests should then be assessed against a set of criteria clearly set out in the council's speed limit policy, and that they should include the safety record of the zone, the use of the zone for travel to and from school, sheltered housing, care homes, and other amenities attracting big footfall, and whether there is public support for that request. I've said it's disappointing that the resolutions passed by the council 3 years ago and more recently, despite those, there's no recommendation regarding how this committee should proceed to implement those recommendations. It's also disappointing that the reports don't seek to address any of the points made in the preambles to those resolutions. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, may I strongly urge the committee to move swiftly to adopt a balanced, sensible 20-mile-an-hour policy that you're all talking about and have been for years, as described in the resolutions from 3 years ago and adopted by the council and the preamble, and please do that without further delay. Sorry to get emotional, Mr. Chairman, but it is really frustrating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, thank you. Do you have any... Okay, Richard Fenwick.
Thank you, Chair. I won't comment on the democratic processes involved and the next steps in terms of that we've talked about in terms of bringing reports forward. I did just want to draw attention within the, I know it's a big document, within the full review, starting at page 101 of the pack, there is wording there that sets out the consideration the panel gave with officer input to 20's plenty and 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And also within the document at page 108, it does say relevant to 20-mile-an-hour limits, specific criteria should be established to assess the suitability of 20-mile-an-hour limits on local conditions of traffic patterns. So it might not be reassurance to bring that back, but I just wanted to say that as I referred to Councillor Clark earlier, whilst the motion came after this work was done, I don't believe that they're in conflict with each other, and us setting out a speed limit policy that has very, well, it will be agreed by members, but criteria that take into account many of the very valid things you've just set out, Councillor Dilks, is planned to be part of our speed limit review. So we should be taking that forward anyway, and had almost preempted that before the motion came along. So it's just setting out those specific criteria and agreeing those with members that will be the important thing going forward. But we did have a healthy discussion about what's gone on in Wales and what's gone elsewhere, and what we're hearing, and so hopefully we're in a good position to action a sensible policy for the council.
Thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Smith.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman, in allowing me to speak, and also thank you to Councillor Taylor for allowing me to contribute to the review process. In the interest of full disclosure, Chairman, I should declare I am a blue badge holder myself, so this does impact myself. I welcome wholeheartedly the proposed implementations of both environmental weight limits and the proposed changes to the blue badge system in Lincolnshire. I myself have seen how at once 6:30 hits, if you try and get a blue badge space in Lincoln, good luck. You're not going to get one because people will park in them when they choose to. I do, Chairman, with your indulgence, have some questions that I wasn't able to ask until the recommendations were printed. How confident are we that we have the funds necessary to ensure there are sufficient resources deployed to address the issues, especially around environmental weight limit requests and designated blue badge bays? Secondly, Chairman, how long will it take for the backlogs around these requests to be cleared? Approximately, I appreciate it's not an exact science. Thirdly, how will enforcement of disabled bays work after 6 p.m? Because at numerous locations I have witnessed the continual flouting of these and double yellow lines once 6:30 occurs, because residents know our parking wardens are not walking around and they will not get tickets. Fourthly, Chairman, could officers advise if regulations allow photo evidence of such breaches to be submitted by the public so that appropriate action can be taken, because I appreciate our operatives cannot be everywhere at once. And finally, Chairman, based on the new policy, what would happen where speed limits have previously been cited in what would be considered the incorrect place, i.e. there are some speed limits, Chairman, and I have one in my division in Moortown, where there is not sufficient distance between speed limits for the police to actually enforce the speed limit, because there isn't sufficient meterage from one speed limit to another for those to be enforced. Would these be rectified in any new policy so that they could actually be enforced by Lincolnshire Police? Because there are some, based on our old policy and current policy, Chairman, where they aren't actually able to enforce, which defeats the purpose of the speed limit as it's placed. And thank you, Chairman, for your indulgence and allowing me to speak and ask those questions.
Thank you very much. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I might refer to Mick on the enforcement side of things, but did I try and address your other questions, Councillor Smith? Resource levels is similar to what I've said before in terms of LCC staff members. I would suspect they would not purely be working on weight limits, they would also be looking at disabled bays as part of what we do, although the options that we put forward for localised disabled bays that are advisory would be handled within the local highways teams, which is outside of the traffic team. So there's a balance to achieve there, and ultimately it's very hard to say until we actually know how many we start to receive, if a policy is in place for us to be able to start receiving them through the local members. Backlogs wise, again, in terms of disabled bays, there isn't really a backlog because it's not something that Lincolnshire has offered before. So that would be a short amount of time. We do have a list of weight limits that have been requested since we previously had a policy where we would put environmental weight limits in place. I would say there isn't a huge backlog of them, but they would need to go through the various legislative framework and through the approval process of any TRO. So 6 to 12 months generally, I would say. They shouldn't be complicated to the level of some of the longer TROs that we get. And before I hand over to Mick around the enforcement levels, just with regards to the police, Lincolnshire Police are part of the statutory consultation on any traffic regulation order. Unfortunately, we've got many traffic regulation orders in the county that are very old and predate probably anyone in this room at the moment. So anything new that's put in place, they will give a view on enforceability on as part of that consultation. My traffic team does actually sit in with the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership once a week at the moment, and there's good sort of collaboration going on there, informing anything that, to make sure that if there's anything they're aware of they can't enforce, that we do that. So any problems that come up as and when, we are addressing those to make sure that they are actually enforceable.
Councillor Smith. Yes, the problems around enforcement are more to do with straightforward resource than anything else. We do enforce of evenings in urban areas. However, with a relatively small team, only so much can be done at a time. So yes, if we wanted to expand the enforcement and move more into more repeated evening patrols, should we say, yeah, there's a built-in cost that we'd have to look at there.
Thank you very much. Nigel West.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on something Councillor Dilks raised earlier about the motion to Council. And I believe the motion was that this committee would note the comments made about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And that's why it's covered in the executive summary from Chiara. And as Richard said, it's already been covered by the panel in their work, in their deliberation. So I don't think it's been ignored. I think it's just that it's been done in a different way, and the timing of it means that we brought those comments after the report's published. It's as simple as that, really. We're not ignoring it.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, a few comments on this discussion. Great to hear the engagement from members of this committee, and you've clearly gone through this report in some detail, asked some very worthwhile questions. I do appreciate that. Yeah, and as we just heard regarding 20 miles an hour, it was not ignored, taken very seriously. We had some discussions regarding the experience in Wales, and also Mike Clark, Vice Chairman, and I did speak to senior police officers regarding this issue, and recommendation 6C does refer to a package of measures aimed at improving safety outside schools, and clearly, as we just heard, more work is going to take place regarding a speed limit review. So we hear in that passion in this meeting today. And as we've just heard regarding the Blue Badge scheme, that consistent approach needs to take place as soon as possible, because there's clearly a gap there in policy that we do need to address regarding the accessibility for some of our more vulnerable residents, so they can go about their life without that issue that has been brought to our attention in this report. And we've also referred to the process. This report goes to the executive in March, and then of course we will work on the action plan with some dates and timescales. But again, thanks for your contributions here today. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was just to conclude, I guess, a lot of discussion there about the sort of timescales and activity. Just from an officer's perspective, we'll be taking this recommendations once it moves forward and progresses to executive. We'll be taking those away, looking at sort of an action plan or programme, looking to get them implemented as soon as possible. That's something that we're keen to do. Obviously, we've engaged with this as officers, and we'll suggest probably coming back to the scrutiny on a regular basis, just looking at maybe which ones we prioritise, which ones we can move forward. Some, I think, will need additional officer time, and maybe there's a resource issue for us there and we can bring that forward, but some might just be a quick win that we can implement. So just wanted to end it sort of, it's important to us to move these forward as well, and we'll be actively making sure we've got them programmed out for the next year and a half. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee endorses the report and supports the proposed recommendations as set out in the report, and I ask that all comments and suggestions raised by this committee be shared with the executive ahead of its consideration in March. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Clark. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. Those against? None. Any abstentions? None. Thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, item 8, Winter Service Plan Interim Report. The report is on pages 143 to 150 of the agenda pack and presents an interim report on the Winter Service, providing an update on the Council's preparations and activities for managing winter weather conditions that were agreed in the summer of 2024. The report outlines key areas such as resource allocation, fleet readiness and salt stock levels, and operational strategies for road gritting and snow clearance, and highlights challenges such as rising costs climate variability and workforce capacity. In terms of our actions, it is required that we consider and comment on the detail contained in this interim report and recommend any changes or actions to the executive member for Highways, Transport and IT. The report will be presented by Claire Dixon, Policy and Strategic Asset Manager, and Dale Retford, the Network Resilience Manager, is also in attendance for the debate. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. So for background information, we brought the Winter Service Plan as an Executive Councillor decision in June 2024, where we discussed at this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. Lincolnshire County Council carries out precautionary salting and snow clearance treatments on the carriageway and footway in accordance with the Winter Service Plan across the county. And the operation prioritises somewhere in the region of 3,000 kilometres of the Lincolnshire road network, and the precautionary salting network includes strategic A, B and links the county's main villages, links between NHS hospitals and treats within at least 500 metres of all primary and secondary schools wherever possible, and links between all railway and bus stations. The Winter Service Plan outlines that a minimum of 25,000 tonnes of salt should be in stock at the start of the winter season, with a minimum of 15,000 tonnes available at any time throughout the season. Lincolnshire County Council continued to use treated salt for the 2024-25 season, and we have completely moved away from the use of the pre-wetted system. The withdrawal of the old pre-wet system has meant that brine making equipment in the depots is now redundant, and the systems were at the end of their life, all of which being over 20 years old. The replacement prompted the review and change to the treated salt. The first systems were removed from Sturton Depot and Poet Hole in 2023, and all of the sites were completed in 2024, which has enabled much needed depot space to be utilised for other purposes. Just to give a quick update on the fleet. So our 4 spare gritters were scheduled for replacement next year. However, the leasing company went into liquidation and recalled the leased vehicles. As a result, we expedited the purchase of new gritters. Initially, we were informed that these would be ready for October, ready for fleet integration. However, due to issues with the chassis provider, this has not happened. We have now been informed that the gritters will be available by late March to early April. However, to cover the gap, the gritter supplier has provided us with 3 spare gritters at no cost to the authority, and these are currently being used as our spares to cover the fleet. Therefore, for this season so far, the authority has the capability of calling upon 43 LCC-owned gritters plus the 3 from the supplier. In terms of an interim update, the data contained within the report is correct up to the drafting of the report, which was on the 13th of January. And at the start of the season, there were just under 28,509 tonnes of salt available across the county, and at the time of writing the report, there were 19,351 tonnes remaining. A mid-season restock took place at some of our smaller depots, with 1,215 tonnes being delivered to Sturton just before Christmas, and 1,012 tonnes being delivered to Poet Hole over Christmas and New Year. A further restock will take place from the 14th, or has taken place from the 14th of January, at Sturton, Willingham, Manby, Ancaster and Poet Hole, and each will receive 500 tonnes to replenish stock over the next few weeks. The salt will be monitored, and further decisions on restock will be dictated by weather and usage, and further deliveries will be arranged if necessary. However, the majority of the restock will take place over the summer when salt prices are lower, and this will bring the depot stocks back above the 25,000 tonne threshold. Last winter, the authority carried out 51 precautionary salting turnouts and utilised approximately 12,100 tonnes of salt. There were no snow days where severe weather routes were run. So far this season, it has been a little bit busier. We have undertaken 2 snow runs, one on the 19th of November and a partial on the 6th of January, and we've carried out 41 precautionary salting runs using 11,580 tonnes of salt up until the 13th of January, and this is just over double what had been used at this same point last year. This increase is predominantly due to the severe weather event that commenced on the 6th of January, leading to a major incident being declared across Lincolnshire.
During this event, a coordinated multi-agency response was required to ensure public safety and maintain essential service. During the 3-day event, our entire fleet of gritters was deployed extensively, resulting in over 700 hours of gritting operations. This effort was crucial in keeping the primary and secondary road networks operational, and it's also worth noting that our operations did not cease with the ending of the major incident. Operations, in fact, continued for a further 4 days until the morning of the 13th of January, resulting in a further 1,200 hours of gritting. During the severe weather event alone, 15 precautionary salting runs were carried out using 4,860 tonnes of salt and 645 gritter actions over 7 days of icing. These efforts ensured the main network in Lincolnshire remained safe for travel, and the cost of these operations was approximately $350,000. In addition to gritting, over that period, 60 tonnes of sand were used to create over 2,000 sandbags. These sandbags were distributed to areas to prevent flooding and mitigate the impact of melting snow and ice. The cost of this operation was approximately $20,000. With over 5,500 miles of roads under our management, only 25 roads were closed at the peak of the bad weather. By utilising tracking data, we ensured that these roads were gritted prior to reopening, minimising disruption and ensuring safety. During this event, Lincolnshire roads saw temperatures as low as -7, which was accompanied by heavy frosts. This period marked the coldest night in the county since 2019, with some areas experiencing their lowest temperatures since 2010. Aside from this event, we did see a relatively mild start to the season prior to the sudden shift in weather on the 19th of November, with 5 to 8 centimetres of snow falling in the north and the west of the county. This resulted in 7 runs, one with snow ploughs fitted. There was a second spell of cold weather in late November and early December, which accounted for another 6 runs. The remainder of December was mild, with just 3 runs occurring from the 4th of December through to New Year's Day. Moving on to grit bins, we have had 174 requests to refill the grit bins, mainly after the recent snow and cold weather in January. These are currently being restocked by the contractor. We have also provided 5 new grit bins and replaced 21 damaged ones so far this season. 1-tonne salt bags issued to parish councils have been distributed following an advert in the summer to gauge interest. We have received 45 requests, and these have either been delivered or in the process of being delivered. There have been 20 requests for additional roads to be added to the precautionary salting network so far this season, and as per the winter service plan, these will be reviewed by the network resilience team over the summer. Finally, just one area that isn't contained within the report, but I thought it would be useful just to give an update to this committee. On the 7th of January, we unveiled our first named gritter, Snowfall Hudson, who's named after the BBC weather forecaster Paul Hudson. This name was chosen from a selection of suggestions from BBC viewers, and up until the 22nd of January, this gritter has already been out 58 times. It's done just over 6,200 kilometres and used 363 tonnes of salt during its operations. Our fleet of gritters will continue to be named, with Phase 2 seeing the naming of Scott Salton after the BBC Radio Lincolnshire presenter Scott Dalton. This name was also chosen from a selection of suggestions from listeners. For Phase 3, there will be 10 more gritters named based on suggestions from primary schools, care homes and day centres. These winners have already been chosen by Lincolnshire County Council, and presentations and media events will take place in the near future. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to highlight the hard work that has gone into this so far. We have received extensive coverage across all BBC platforms, and this will continue with bespoke gritter-based media throughout the winter on TV, radio, social media and online platforms. Additionally, the BBC and other media will cover the community-focused aspect of the remaining gritters to be named. This campaign, which has been a year in the making, is now significantly raising awareness of our gritting efforts at Lincolnshire County Council, reaching a vast audience and showcasing the vital work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much for your report. It's really interesting. And actually, thank you for the bit that you added on the end as well, because it's a point that I was going to raise, that it is wonderful to see so much positive press around regarding Lincolnshire County Council's Gritters. And as you say, the naming ceremony and even the stats that you're using as well are so widely publicised that they pop up all over the place for me. They're being talked about by parish councils. But I think more than any of that, it's actually bringing awareness to how many miles and kilometres of roads you've got to cover and how much you're doing and where you're out, where perhaps don't even realise you're out. So I think that's been a really positive message, and it's certainly been well received by everybody in my area. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? Seeing none, I would like to thank you, Councillor Vernon, for your question. And I move that the committee endorse this report and that our satisfaction be recorded in relation to progress updates and assurances provided. And I ask for Councillor Vernon's comment by this committee is shared with leading officers and executive member for their information. Does anyone dissent? No, thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to item 9 of the agenda, Civil Parking Enforcement Annual Report 2023-24. The report is on pages 151 to 172 of the agenda pack and provides the committee with an update on parking enforcement activities across Lincolnshire. The report outlines key performance metrics, including the volume of penalties issued and compliance trends and financial outcomes. It highlights efforts to improve safety and traffic flow, particularly around schools and high-demand areas, while addressing challenges such as workforce capacity and use of technology for enforcement. In terms of our actions, it is asked that we consider and comment on the detail contained within the report, that the report be noted and endorsed for publication on the Council's website. The report will be presented by Matt Jones, Parking Services Manager. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. The report's written in its usual format, as we've seen over the past couple of years or so, just to give a complete oversight of the parking service for 23-24 financial year. So I'll detail some of the key elements of the report now. Page 158 highlights the introduction of 2 solar-powered pay and display machines, which we introduced within our coastal country park. This is in addition to the pay-by-phone service, which has already been in operation and has been for a few years now. There were approximately, or just over 43,000 transactions which took place in the car parks, which was an increase of 5,000 from the previous year. We continue to receive positive feedback from members of the public, residents, schools as well, and we've included just a snippet of those within the report to identify some of the positive outcomes which have come from the enforcement service. In June, we introduced a new virtual resident permit scheme in Grantham, and then a few months later we took over the administration of the resident scheme in Sleaford. That was from North Kesteven District Council. More statistics and information related to the schemes are highlighted on page 162. I think moving forwards we'll include some more comparable data, so we can look at previous years to ascertain if there's increases in permits being issued, and the same for visitor permits as well, which we also process for residents. We continue to process parking bay suspensions, issuing parking waivers and supporting events and highway works with enforcement as and when required. For example, we've recently assisted with some race days at Market Raise and Racecourse. And whilst we continue to be proactive with our patrolling endeavours, we do also welcome nuisance parking reports, which are highlighted to us by members of the public. On page 166, we've demonstrated that we received just under 4,000 reports, which was an increase of 1,000. So very popular tool for members of the public to utilise to liaise with us and identify concerns in local areas spread across the county. Our penalty charge notices that we've issued have been our highest to date. It was around 48,000 which were issued. Part of the increase links in with our off-street enforcement of the coastal car parks, introduction of permit scheme in Grantham and other areas, but an overall improvement in terms of how we deploy resource and where we're visiting across the county. Naturally, with the increase of penalty charges, the number of challenges submitted by members of the public and motorists has increased as well. Information detailed on page 170. We've been extremely consistent over the years in terms of our decision-making processes in determining a response to a challenge which is submitted. So the cancellation statistics are quite consistent over the past few years. And that shows that our decision making aligns very well with our procedures manual, our parking policies that we have in place. On page 171, we detail a breakdown of our financial performance with a surplus of £164,000. That's been added to the parking enforcement reserves, and a significant portion of this reserve will help cost or go towards the cost of the CCTV enforcement cameras and mobile cameras, which we're introducing over the coming months to monitor non-compliance parking outside of schools in the county. It is worth highlighting that costs of running the service increasing annually, nearly £200,000 a year. However, the continued improvements in how we patrol, where we're being responsive to nuisance parking requests and trying to knock down that non-compliance element on the highway does have that direct impact upon the overall PCN issuance and the income levels as well that we see. The report concludes with an outline to the future. Just to bear in mind, obviously, that this is the financial year from 23-24, so this was written, this report, a few months after that. The enforcement and back office contract went live in November 24, with a greater use of technology being utilised to monitor the school markings like we've discussed, or the soon-to-be discussed elements of that service. But also we've introduced a new parking procedures manual where we updated some of our information in terms of how we deploy, where we deploy, and our discretionary processes that we have in place. So that's just a quick overview of the report itself, but happy to answer any questions or queries.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stokes.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to let this pass, as it's within my division. No, we certainly welcome the new residence parking scheme and the permit scheme that was implemented in June 23. It was extremely successful and it continues to be successful. And I know the team, when the permits were starting to be issued, did a lot of work with residents, and the residents were able to take advantage of it. And I certainly look forward to extending it further in my division. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Said it before, I got nothing but praise for the service. I've got 5 schools in my division. When officers are there, there's no problem. As soon as officers aren't there, it's like every man for himself. So I welcome the fact that, you know, we're going to have a camera at one of them. The difference between nuisance parking and obstruction, we've already come to conclusion if it's an obstruction, it's a police matter. So what is a nuisance parking? Is it just when they're parking on yellow lines, or is it other? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, in terms of obstruction of a pavement, for example, that if there's a highway restriction like a yellow line, a single or a double yellow line, we can enforce that restriction. If there isn't a restriction on the ground itself, then that matter would still be a police matter. However, in terms of nuisance parking, that provides an opportunity for a member of the public to kind of almost convey a concern that they have. So on our reporting function that we have, we try and direct the member of the public to the right channels. So if it is an obvious obstruction, we try and advise, look, you know, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and these are the measures that we could potentially consider to be put in place to remedy that moving forwards. But we do try and work as closely as possible with our police colleagues. We have some joint patrols planned in the future for working outside of schools as well, so that we can tackle both the elements that we're responsible for and also what the police can action on from their remit.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back?
Yeah. Just one more question. I think I got this right. You won't accept photographs, will you, of illegally parked cars, and you won't take action against them because residents can't understand this, and I've told them it's, you know, the law and that's it.
That is correct. I mean, we welcome members of the public to present us with evidence because that helps us gauge exactly what is occurring when we're not present on the ground. So that is always welcomed. However, we cannot issue a parking ticket retrospectively on the basis of a photograph being provided. Our officer has to be on site at the time to issue a fix to a vehicle or hand to a motorist. So it's an approved device which is utilised, and like I said, photographic evidence is welcome. You can't lie. Photographs are very, very clear, and they help demonstrate what we can and can't do in terms of you know, kind of suitably arranging future patrols as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, okay, Jonathan, thank you.
Sorry, I hope you don't mind, just to help with that response to Councillor Clark, as part of the paper that we brought to the December scrutiny looking at the CCTV outside of schools, we talked through some of the changes that we've recently brought into the recently awarded APCOA contract. Some of those in the future was looking at rapid deployment. So what the CCTV enforcement will do is, in theory, free up some capacity for officer time. What we are able to do in the future and are actively looking at is some of our deployment teams, if we are getting those nuisance parking reports coming through, we might be able to respond there and then out to locations to enforce. So whilst it's not the member of the public taking a photo and us enforcing off the back of that, we are actively looking to redeploy staff and move sort of to intervene and try and resolve parking issues that we come across.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have any further speakers? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee endorse this report and that our satisfaction be recorded in relation to the annual picture of civil parking enforcement, and that we are content with assurances provided in relation to concerns as discussed. And I ask that comments raised by this committee be shared with leading officers and executive member for their information. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. Nobody, thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to the final item of the agenda, item 10, the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 173 to 180 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara Hajianu, our Scrutiny Officer. Our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Members, I'm really happy to report we have no changes at the work programme as it is laid out in this agenda pack. Just to bring your attention to page 174-75, our next meeting on the 3rd of March 2025 is the final meeting of this committee for this council term. And we will be receiving 5 key reports for debate, and these include the spending plan for Lincolnshire's 2025-26 BISIP grant allocation, the approach to transport strategy development, which is another annual update, the Q3 for highways performance, and the Q3 for transport performance, and provisionally the major work schemes update report. And I say provisionally based on whether we do have business to be reported at this next meeting. Otherwise, as we have done in previous iterations of this report, we may move to the next available meeting if business is not sufficient to be reported on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 173 to 180. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. Nobody. Thank you very much. That is agreed. That now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you.